やってくれると思う。
The Macross franchise has three interconnected main pillars: songs, love triangles, and Valkyries. If you draw lines between them, a triangle appears. A triangle can also represent an uppercase delta, the fourth letter of the Greek alphabet, which, in certain scenarios, is also used to represent a change. Macross Delta, the fourth full-length Macross series, definitely represents a change for the franchise, in both a fantastic and a not-so-fantastic way. It's unbelievable how uneven and erratic the series is, going from super interesting stuff like the expansion of the protoculture creation myths with the Windermerian, the Ragnan and the Voldorian, to something as boring as the revelation of the enemy's intentions. The mechanical design, while great as always, it's elevated to a new level by explaining that the enemy vessels have a more or less direct connection with the anti-UN fighters from way back from Macross Zero. Now, in theory, Macross Delta has everything it needs for it to be a great series. A wonderful follow-up to the Majestic Frontier with concepts that surpass every other series that came before. Yet, it's under-delivered. To be more exact, the story that accompanied and introduced the concepts felt rushed and uninteresting, like if they were trying to cram as much lore at the cost of character development. In essence, Macross Delta is definitely a weird ride with great individual elements but bad overall execution. But you know what? I'll be totally honest here. For me, conceptually, it is a great series, if not the best, a worthy successor that tried to bring together many of the concepts that were introduced way back since the very beginning. A story that was so ambitious that it fell completely short. But, as comic writer Matt Fraction once said, I'd rather watch interesting failures than boring, easy successes. Now, there are a lot of rumors that suggest that the second part of the show had a lot of executive meddling, with the main change being that Kawamori wanted to get rid of the love triangle, but the head honchos of Big West responded, that's no bueno. But leaving the rumors aside, what makes Macross Delta such a controversial series? Was it the inclusion of the idol group? Not really, we've seen many idols throughout the decades, and I'll even go ahead and say that Walkure was the obvious next step of Firebomber. Then, was it the enemy? Well, if you think about it, a small kingdom with great military might that, when the true king died, the successor transformed the realm into an almost fascist reign that wanted to rule the galaxy? We've already seen something like that in another series to great success. It starts with the last letter of the alphabet and rhymes with Eon. So no, it was not the enemy. The concept of a show focusing on a certain squadron is not new either. In the original, we had the Vermilion and the Skull Squadron. In 7, we have the Diamond and Sound Force, and in Frontier, we had again the Skull Squad. Having said that, my thoughts are that while Macross Delta is a good show filled with great concepts, its storytelling didn't break the mold nor push the boundaries in an organic way. For someone like Kawamori, whose life motto is to never do something twice, Delta's main storyline feels too safe, too into his comfort zone. A setting brimming with shiny new concepts ready to be explored, but weighed down by a boring main story. With that said, my friends, I'm Absa, and it's time now to explore why it feels that Delta's story was going nowhere, to the point of falling into the trap of telling and not showing. Until it wasn't, but it was too late for that. And as usual, spoilers ahead. As said by the main man himself, Shoji Kawamori, every Macross story has three main pillars: love triangles, transforming robots, and songs. prior to Macross Delta, and leaving aside the OVAs, we can more or less see that each main entry had a clear main pillar. This is not to say that the others weren't there, it's just that we, or at least me, remembers one the most. For Super Dimension Fortress Macross, the main pillar was the transforming robots with the introduction of the Valkyries and the SDF-1. Macross 7 had the songs, with Neki Basara barging into the battlefield armed only with his voice and his guitar. In Frontier, even though I quite like the Armor Messiah, the Alto Cheryl Ranka love triangle is what definitely kept the plot vibrant along the Bajra conspiracy. So, for a pioneer like Kawamori, after successfully exploring the three main pillars in previous series, what's next? Well, destroy one of them. Back in 2015, Shoji spoke a little bit about the setting and story of Delta, and something noteworthy is the fact that there was a hidden message in the logo, something that may reflect his original intention with the series that didn't entirely happen. He pointed out that the Delta symbol in the logo is made of triangular symbols, to symbolize the three main thematic elements of Macross: music, a love triangle, and transforming planes. However, he noted that the two symbols are split, and explained that it meant that the three elements won't come together as expected in the new story. Back to the present, it did eventually happen, until the additional arc of Absolute Life. Yet, within the original Delta storyline, it did fall flat as something to evolve or change the core of the franchise. Having said that Macross Delta failed at breaking the mold can lead us to the opposite proposal. How did Macross Delta fare within the known staples? And that's where we can see that by having the ambitious goal of breaking the mold but then stopping, be it by design or by executive meddling, the three main pillars fell short and the story didn't fully mature, to the point of having info dump episodes courtesy of Burger Stone, aka Mr. Exposition. That's probably why Macross Delta feels a little bit weird and underwhelming. It promised something different, yet it didn't deliver it until the movies. But before moving on, let's talk a little bit about the plot. Macross Delta tells the story of Hayate Immelman, a good-for-nothing kid who discovers that his true passion is flying. Freya Vion, a young Windermerian kid who is desperately trying to audition for the supergroup Walkure, and, to a lesser extent, Mirage Farina Genius, a by-the-book pilot who is struggling to find her place within her family's legacy. Set in the year 2068 and 8 years after the events of Macross Frontier, the story takes place in a remote part of the Milky Way galaxy called the Brisinger Globular Cluster, which is plagued by the Bar Syndrome, a mysterious phenomenon which turns people berserk without any apparent cause. An idol supergroup, Tactical Sound Unit Walkure, uses the power of their songs to calm down the infected. But they're not alone. The songstresses are assisted by the Delta Flight, a team of experienced Valkyrie pilots belonging to the Chaos private military. The true conflict begins when the aerial knights of the Windermere Kingdom decide to start a war against the nuns, and it gets worse when Chaos finds out that the Windermerian have found a way to exploit the Bar Syndrome in their favor to control the whole cluster as the alleged rightful heirs of the protoculture. It's an interesting synopsis, right? So let's pinpoint the pillars. First, the love triangle. Supposedly, in this story, the love triangle was composed by Hayate, Freya, and Mirage. Yet, it's absurdly one-sided towards Hayate and Freya, with Mirage, a potentially great legacy character, having absolutely nothing going on for her. From the very beginning, Hayate and Freya had great chemistry between them and no uncertainty implied. Unlike the Hikaru Misa Minmay triangle where Misa and Hikaru slowly grew together, here Mirage never stood a chance. In fact, the sub-triangle made up by Messer, Kaname and Arad is better developed, with Kaname struggling to decide. So, love triangle verdict? Underdeveloped to the point of barely being a triangle. So, it definitely leads to nothing new. Second pillar, the music. And to be honest, I do like the Walkure magical girls. The characters were colorful and completely different from one another. And unlike Fire Bomber, where Basara always took center stage, here we can see that every girl has different abilities going on for them. Machina is a mechanic, Reina is a hacker, Kaname is a legacy idol turned strategist, Freya is a Windermerian and that grants her musical space magic through her rune, and Mikumo, well, Mikumo has a great background with direct connections to the protoculture and even the mysterious Lady M. In fact, unlike the love triangle, all of the characters are super interesting, so much so that it's almost as if we needed more time to explore their backgrounds, particularly Mikumo's, since she's the embodiment of the dilemma: is music the protoculture's greatest weapon or the protoculture's greatest gift? And again, while maybe not your cup of tea, an idol supergroup is right in line within the Macross sphere, with a couple of songs that really shine, like Ikenai Borderline. So, musical verdict, jam-packed to the point of being underexplored. Finally, regarding the Valkyries, while probably not as impactful as the Messiah, I do like the Siegfried's triangular silhouette with the forward swept wings, and the fact that we have 5 different color variants also works in its favor. As for the aerial knights, even though I don't like at all the silhouettes of the SV262 Draken 3, they are super interesting lore-wise. According to the Epsilon Foundation, the SV in the name of the Draken 3, which stands for Slayer of Valkyries, is in fact a nod to the first ever variable fighter developed way back in the Unification Wars. Remember the conflict from Macross Zero? Well, according to anti-UN Alliance pilots Didi and Nora, the UN Spacey stole their variable fighter tech. Berger Stone further states that the Epsilon Foundation development team was highly inspired and guided by the design of the SB-51 Alpha variable fighter and was able to build such a fine machine by studying and enhancing the prior design. They also have 2 little dragons on the side that act like a modern or alternate version of the X9 Ghost from way back from Macross Plus. I find this a super interesting nod to the overall Macross chronology, since the rival's Valkyrie is a direct descendant of a previous enemy's aircraft, and it also uses something that once terrorized Macross City. The problem is that we find out about this via an information dump of Berger to the Macross Elysian, so it's not as impactful as it should be. So, Valkyrie verdict, great concepts, just a very bad way of explaining them. And before I continue on talking as if I didn't like the series, which in fact I did enjoy, I'll end this part by saying that the previous statement can be said of the whole show. Excellent concepts, badly executed and explained. A super interesting series that probably needed more time to fully explore them instead of just shoving them in our faces with brutally long information dumps. While they couldn't decide how to subvert our expectations, episodes kept coming out, so in the end they needed the plot to move super fast. And how do you achieve that? You tell everything instead of showing it. But hey, I did said that I liked the show, so I'll briefly touch upon the concept that I found quite amazing. From the very beginning of Macross Delta, we are presented with new children of the protoculture aside humanity and centrality. This should have been huge, yet it was like, okay, we have water people and cat people and wind people. And speaking of the wind people, the Windermerian, they are a super powerful race whose only drawback is their short life expectancy. But they are a kingdom whose legacy can be traced back to the protoculture era, fought an independence war against the nuns, and with their great pilots, they won. They can also sense changes in the air and emotions in other beings thanks to their rune. All of their backstory is super interesting, and it almost begs the question, What if they were the protagonist? Also, they use music and songs against the main crew. Where have we seen that? Oh yeah, in Macross 2. Finally, the concept of an enemy using songs against the protagonist returned in a much better presentation. On the other hand, the Epsilon Foundation's investigation of the protoculture is also super interesting. Not only did they manage to recover the Sigurd Valens, a super battle fortress from the era of the protoculture, but also developed the theory that songs have been used as a weapon throughout history, and they speculated that Mikumu Gainiver was developed by Lady M to harness the power of song energy. This is absolutely amazing, as it proposes a subversion of the original intent of music by asking, what if the protoculture genetically coded a vulnerability towards music in all of their creations? That way, they could in fact weaponize music to their advantage. This could have been a huge revelation with a ton of implications that unfortunately was left dangling. And speaking of Mikumu, she's a clone of the Star Singer, an immensely powerful being whose song is capable of resonating throughout the galaxy. The Star Singer is said to be descended from the royal family of Windermere, whose song is capable of drawing out the true power of the protoculture structures that lay hidden throughout the Milky Way galaxy. This, along with the Singer of the Wind's ability to manifest the Bar syndrome through their song, makes great cases in favor of the music as weapon theory. Also, when Mikumu and Lloyd discovered the Star Singer lineage, there are symbols of birds and fishes, with that making a direct connection between Windermere and Ragnan, but also a symbolic connection to the bird-human creation myths of the Mayan islands from Macross 0. Again, Macross Delta displaying an excellent usage of subtle nods to the overall Macross chronology. Another visual element that now has a name is the ability to read and see the wind of the Windermerians. The space magic-y glowy effect was first used as the mysterious energy that lifted Shin's BF0. We also saw that when Alto was getting closer to the Vajra Queen, he was almost riding the wind in his Durandal. It's here in Delta where we now discover that when you get super attuned to a certain song or sound energy, you can definitely read and ride the wind. Your senses become one with the air, and your abilities to fly and fight grow exponentially. The Windermerian can do that thanks to the runes, but every protoculture child can manifest that ability if certain conditions are met. I really liked how they managed to justify that visual effect and give it a great in-story meaning. If anything, Macross Delta was super ambitious with its scope. So much so that they butchered in trying to grasp where they wanted to go and left some plot threads either completely unresolved like Lady M, or closed them in very unsatisfactory ways. But I do applaud how Kawamori and his crew dared to make a change, and even though it seemed like it failed, it's always better to try something new, fail and learn about it than to stay in the boring comfort zone. That, and I do not have any inside knowledge nor anything like that, but I believe that it was because of the warm reception of this show that they decided to bring forth the heavy hitters for the second movie. I'm talking about my favorite character, Maximilian Genius, and if you already saw the movie, you know what other thing appears. It may be because I saw all of Macross 7 and probably nothing will be as grueling as that, but I honestly did like Delta. In and of itself, it's not a terrible series, it's just uneven. Some things are great and others not so much. It may also have the same problem of Double Zeta, that being that both Macross Delta and Double Zeta Gundam are follow-ups to two of the best mecha series ever, Zeta Gundam and Macross Frontier. Well, at least in my opinion. So, leaving aside the uneven, wacky storytelling or weird mechanical designs, from the very beginning they had everything against them. Anyway, as I was saying, since I did like the series, I tried to focus only on the good things, particularly on how Delta managed to expand the lore of the franchise. Now, if the saga indeed ended with the first movie, then it definitely would have been remembered as an experiment that not quite succeeded. Yet, Absolute Life was amazing, a great capstone that elevates the Delta mythos to a new, very much needed height. But the Zeta Live exploration is for another video. Now tell me, did you enjoy the Macross Delta original story? Do you think I'm being too soft towards it? Leave it in the comments, and as you may or may not know, my name is Absa, and we can continue the conversation over at Twitter, where you can follow me at Absalonicus, and on Instagram, where I post pictures of my figures, my cats, and sometimes even myself. I'll be trying to talk more about anime, comics, and mechanical design via model kits. Until next time, always remember that in fiction lays power, so let's use it to forge a new type of story. Our hero's journey.